See, domestic violence is really not about the other person, but really about the amount of self control that someone has over someone else. And they see themselves as that other person and that how they want to control their behaviors.
It's a murder-suicide that shocked the nation when a 25-year-old nursing student is shot dead at a truck stop by her ex, a 26-year-old doctor who would go on to kill himself.
Relationships are already complex, complicated, and nuanced, even without the violence. So it is hard to say that there was anything that the victim knew in advance or could have done except the moment she saw something left.
Investigators say 25-year-old Gina Bryant, a nursing student at the University of Michigan Flint, was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend, 26-year-old Justin Wendling, on Friday, October 13th. The day before, Bryant's coworkers reported her missing when she never returned to work after leaving for a lunch break. Her friends also reported they began receiving, quote, odd text messages from her phone. Investigators say Wendling had been waiting at Bryant's home. Security video from a neighbor showed him lead her to his vehicle just before 2 o'clock that afternoon. The next day, authorities say Wendling called his parents, admitting he'd shot and killed Bryant. Investigators later confirmed she'd been killed at a truck stop in LaSalle, Illinois, some 375 miles away from her home. According to a release from investigators, Wendling told his parents he planned to die by suicide. Wendling then left Illinois and headed another 80 miles west to Bettendorf, Iowa. As local officers approached, Wendling shot himself. In the days leading up to her murder, Bryant had moved out of the apartment she shared with Wendling. Law enforcement instructor and litigation expert Sonny Slaughter tells Law&Crime Network that's the most dangerous time for those affected by domestic violence.
It is very important. When a person leaves, it is also the most dangerous time for them because the individual perpetrator no longer has the physical, visual presence and control over the person. And that creates more of an antagonistic, interaction between the two that still sometimes go on when people leave a direct situation.
Slaughter says it could be Bryant's move that triggered something in Wendling.
Even when someone threatens to kill someone else, sometimes words are words, but the escalation of the violence is what can be particularly alarming. And the fact that Miss Bryant moved out early, right? Early on, about 2 weeks or so ago. So words can really get a person alarmed, and then they should tell other people if they've ever been threatened, if that makes sense. It is absolutely a good step to leave the physical harm. However, there's often still psychological harm that continues well past when a person leaves.
And there may be an explanation as to why Wendling took Bryant so far from her home.
He may have been trying to figure out what he wanted to do. Suicide is like the final step. He had already committed the murders, but if he had the realization over time as he was traveling and attempting to leave, that might have given him, what are my chances? Now, mind you, he was a doctor, so that he was educated, he was well informed. And, the medical professionals, even in training, as the victim was, a nursing student, they talk about violence and domestic violence in this particular profession. So he may have been weighing his options and deciding, is this something that I really want to do? Take my own life. How can I come back from this? And when he realized that there was nothing that he could come back from, the distance allowed him to really mull over things. Because if he was 100% sure, he could have done it right where he was and right where he killed her.
And the pair's maturity level at ages 25 and 26 may also factor into the equation.
Not necessarily their ages, but their level of maturity and the level of confidence The confidence that she may have initially had. A lot of times we get our intuition tells us things. She may have, when they initially started dating, and this happens sometimes, felt something is not right. I'm not sure. But then we internalize that. So at 25 years old, there are all types of emotions that she was feeling. And had she suspected something, not necessarily danger, but things that were of concern, she may have internalized that. And a lot of times people do that, say, well, maybe I'm overreacting. And that's not necessarily an overreaction. But for a 25-year-old and other people saying, well, you're young and maybe you're overreacting, those are things and cues that then we hear and internalize for ourselves and say, okay, I'm only 25. I don't know everything. For the perpetrator, he's 26 years old, also not in control, like I said earlier, of his emotions, his self control. And if he was someone who was surrounded or who was in an environment that allowed him to behave these ways without any consequences, then no matter what his age, he would have had these type of behaviors and actions. It was common to him.
Slaughter says in recent years there's been an uptick in perpetrators admitting to their crimes. She says that may be why Wendling called his parents admitting to Bryant's murder.
Lately, we've been seeing more and more perpetrators identifying, recognizing, and acknowledging their behaviors. They identify that this is wrong, they acknowledge it, and they also want family members in particular to know that this is what I've done, this is who I am, and these are going to be the results of the consequences. We're seeing a lot of that in mass shootings and in other incidents where they want someone to know who they were, who they are, and what they've done.
But Wendling's suicide may not have been entirely planned.
This may not have been the outcome that he decided. He may not have even thought that anyone saw him commit this particular crime. But then when he was identified and then notified via all of the things, okay, so it's time to call the parents. The parents may have said you need to turn yourself in, and those are not consequences that he really wanted. So the suicide by cop, which is what we kind of call it, is the option when cops are upon you, then you really want them to do what you can't do, or to encourage you in a different type of way. I'm going to do this before they do something, and that is the end for me.
Slaughter says the very act of domestic violence itself stemmed from Wendling rather than anything Bryant did.
See, domestic violence is really not about the other person, but really about the amount of self control that someone has over someone else. And they see themselves as that other person and that how they want to control their behaviors. So I know that might sound strange that my self control impacts how other people, how I control others. But that is really what that is about. It is about a shift in power dynamics. And my perpetrators' level of determination and threat that they feel not being able to control another person is really about them being able to control their own emotions, their own anger. And I'm saying that because a lot of times victims tend to take on, what did I do? What could I have done differently? How could this person have how could I see something in this person and they're this way? Victims take that on when it's really not something that they should do. This is about the actions and behaviors of someone else and their lack of self control.
It's possible the case could continue on in court, but Slaughter says that's not likely.
The only thing we could go back, and I say we, the criminal justice system, could go back and analyze whether the victim made any contact with law enforcement, and if so, what did they do? Did they see something? Is there something that they could have done if they were ever notified? The family will also really be thinking about this. There's nothing that they can do in the criminal justice system except for figure out things that they may have missed and then advocate for those things.
In the end, Slaughter explains there are several things you should do if you're leaving a domestic violence situation.
So, one of the things, depending on the level of threat and violence within the situation, is how a person should determine whether they should seek out legal remedies. Protection from abuse orders, notifying law enforcement of previous incidents, even though they might not have, and try to get them involved to see what avenues they could potentially have to secure themselves. Also, when you get a protection from abuse order, that also involves going before a judge. Many times people don't have the series of documented events that courts like to have when it's making an order. And that is because people are so afraid. The other thing that individuals should do is notify as many family and friends as possible. When they move into a new location, let other people know, even though others don't want to, you don't want to get people involved in your previous relationship. But if they see something, then they need to know what to say and who to say, and not, delay any type of response and notification to others.
A memorial service for Bryant was held on October 23rd. If you or someone you know is affected by domestic violence, contact the number on your screen. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.